In the summer of 2012, the quiet suburban town of Roseland, Illinois, became the center of a crime that no one saw coming. Samantha Wright, a 32-year-old housewife, had been married to her husband, Marcus, for 3 years. Their relationship had started out like a fairy tale, with an age difference that fascinated many. Marcus was 7 years her junior, a 25-year-old ambitious entrepreneur who had quickly built a small fortune. However, financial troubles began to strain their once idyllic marriage, and their lives took a tragic turn. Samantha Wright's life had always been full of ambition and beauty. Born in 1980, she grew up in the heart of Chicago, raised by a single mother who worked as a nurse. From a young age, Samantha was taught the importance of hard work, though she always dreamed of something more glamorous than the simple life she had known. By the time she was 18, she was already captivating with her stunning appearance and sharp mind. Many would say that she could have easily been a model, but Samantha had other plans. She wanted to build a life where she could live in luxury and comfort, far from the struggles she grew up with. In 2006, Samantha found herself working as an event planner for a small but successful company in Chicago. She excelled in her role, organizing high-end corporate events and galas that catered to the city's elite. Every event was an opportunity for her to network and rub shoulders with powerful people, though she never expected that her own life would change at one of these events. It was a crisp evening in the fall of 2008 when Samantha met Marcus. She was overseeing a large corporate gala, making sure everything was perfect. The lights, the music, the champagne, all flowing seamlessly. It was the kind of high society event where million-dollar deals were made with a simple handshake. Marcus Wright, a 25-year-old entrepreneur, was one of the key attendees that night. He had recently launched a tech startup that was already gaining attention for its innovative software solutions. He wasn't like the other attendees, older businessmen who had been in the game for decades. Marcus was young, vibrant, and full of energy, standing out among the crowd. Samantha noticed him immediately. There was something magnetic about the way Marcus moved through the room, confident but approachable, unlike many of the stiff, older men she had encountered before. As the night went on, Marcus found himself in conversation with Samantha. He was intrigued by her sharp organizational skills and her ability to handle such an elaborate event with ease. They exchanged stories about their work and ambitions, both drawn to each other's determination and drive. Marcus spoke passionately about the future of his tech company, while Samantha shared how she had worked her way up from modest beginnings to planning high-profile events like this one. The connection was instant, and from that night on, their paths were intertwined. Within weeks, Samantha and Marcus were inseparable. Their relationship moved quickly, much to the surprise of everyone around them. Samantha's friends had always seen her as independent, never the type to settle down so soon, especially not with someone 7 years younger than her. But there was something about Marcus that made Samantha feel alive in a way she hadn't before. He was ambitious, just like her, and offered her a glimpse of the luxurious life she had always wanted. By early 2009, Marcus's tech company had skyrocketed in success, bringing in enough wealth to provide them both with a lifestyle that most could only dream of. Samantha, who had spent her life building her career, made the decision to leave her job as an event planner. It was not an easy choice, after all. Her career had been a source of pride and independence for years. But Marcus reassured her that she deserved to relax and enjoy the fruits of their success. She embraced the new role of a full-time housewife, moving into their newly purchased home in Roseland, Illinois, a beautiful suburban neighborhood far from the chaos of city life. Their wedding, which took place in the summer of 2009, was nothing short of a fairy tale. It was a grand affair with over 200 guests attending. Samantha wore a custom-made gown, and Marcus looked every bit the successful young entrepreneur that he was. Their love seemed perfect, the kind of relationship that others envied. Samantha's transition from working woman to housewife seemed smooth on the surface, and she settled into her new life with ease. She was now surrounded by luxury, designer clothes, lavish vacations, and a beautiful home. However, deep down, Samantha occasionally found herself missing the thrill of her old career. Planning events had always given her a sense of purpose and control, something that being a housewife didn't quite fulfill. Marcus, on the other hand, was completely engrossed in his work, spending long hours at his office, determined to keep his company thriving. For a while, Samantha was content, indulging in the luxuries Marcus's wealth provided and throwing herself into the role of the perfect wife. By the time 2011 came around, things began to shift. Marcus, always looking for the next big opportunity, made a large investment in a startup that promised huge returns. But the investment was a disaster. Over the course of just a few months, they lost nearly everything they had saved. The lavish lifestyle they had grown accustomed to was suddenly out of reach. Samantha found herself increasingly frustrated, not only with their financial situation, but with the absence of the excitement and purpose she once had. The tension between them grew. Though Marcus remained hopeful, constantly reassuring Samantha that they would recover from the setback, she began to grow resentful. She no longer saw Marcus as the young, ambitious man she had fallen in love with, but as someone who had failed to protect the life they had built together. Still, Marcus loved Samantha deeply, and he was determined to make things right. As the financial strain worsened in 2012, Samantha started seeking comfort elsewhere, leading her down a dark path she never anticipated. As the months passed, the weight of their financial struggles bore down heavily on Samantha and Marcus's once picture-perfect marriage. By early 2012, the cracks in their relationship had widened, and the strain became too much for Samantha to bear. While Marcus spent most of his time desperately trying to save his crumbling business, Samantha found herself feeling increasingly isolated and resentful. The excitement of their whirlwind romance had faded, and in its place was a sense of emptiness she couldn't shake. One evening in April 2012, during a charity event she had reluctantly agreed to attend alone, Samantha met Derek Miles. He was everything Marcus used to be: confident, wealthy, and carefree. But unlike Marcus, Derek wasn't burdened by the stresses of a failing business. He was a man who lived in the moment, seemingly untouched by the worries of everyday life. Samantha found herself drawn to his magnetic energy. He was able to provide her with a sense of freedom and excitement that had long been missing from her life. They spoke at length, Derek showing interest in her life and even making her feel desired in a way she hadn't felt in months. Over the next few weeks, their conversations deepened, with Derek frequently showering her with expensive gifts and attention. At first, Samantha saw Derek as a harmless escape from the troubles at home. He provided her with material things that Marcus no longer could, and his affection filled a void that had grown within her. She had no idea that Derek was involved in the drug trade. He had carefully hidden his true identity behind a veil of wealth and charm, presenting himself as a legitimate businessman. It wasn't until she stumbled across a phone conversation in late May that she learned the truth. But by then, she was already in too deep. Samantha knew what kind of man Derek was, but chose to ignore it. Her dissatisfaction with Marcus had become too overwhelming. She didn't care about Derek's illegal activities, because being with him gave her something that Marcus no longer could: control. As her affair with Derek continued, her behavior at home grew increasingly erratic. The once warm and loving housewife had transformed into someone cold and distant, full of anger and frustration. Every interaction with Marcus became a confrontation, with Samantha lashing out at him for things beyond his control. She would often scream at him, blaming him for their financial struggles, and accusing him of failing her as a husband. Marcus, though heartbroken, remained patient. He saw the pain Samantha was in, but believed that their love could overcome this rough patch. He had always been someone who solved problems with logic and reason, and he thought that by fixing their financial situation, he could bring Samantha back to her old self. He had no idea that her heart and mind had already drifted far away from him, consumed by her affair with Derek. In June 2012, Samantha's violent outbursts became a daily occurrence. There were days when Marcus would come home to find broken glass scattered across the floor, the remnants of wine bottles she had hurled in anger. She began drinking heavily, using alcohol as a way to escape from the guilt and turmoil building inside her. When Marcus would try to talk to her, she would shut him down with harsh words, accusing him of being weak, telling him he was the reason they had lost everything. Despite the constant emotional and physical abuse, Marcus held on to the hope that things would improve. He was determined to save their marriage, convinced that Samantha's behavior was only temporary, a result of their financial struggles. By August 2012, the tension in their household had reached its peak. Marcus had been working late every night, desperate to secure new investors and recover what they had lost. Samantha, on the other hand, was spending more and more time with Derek, often disappearing for hours without explanation. On the night of August 14, 2012, Marcus finished a meeting earlier than expected and decided to return home, hoping to surprise Samantha with dinner and talk about their future. He still believed that with time they could mend their broken relationship. It was just after 8 p.m. when Marcus pulled into the driveway of their Roseland home. The evening was quiet, the warm summer air still lingering. As he stepped inside, he immediately noticed that something was off. The house was unusually quiet, except for a faint sound coming from upstairs. At first he thought it was the TV, but as he climbed the stairs, the noises became unmistakable. Intense moans echoing through the hallway. His heart sank as he approached the bedroom door, realizing that the sounds were coming from his own wife. When he pushed open the door, time seemed to stop. There, in the bed they had shared for years, was Samantha, completely entangled with Derek. Her moans filled the room, oblivious to Marcus's presence. The sight was a blow that Marcus hadn't been prepared for. Everything he had feared and suspected came crashing down at that moment. He stood frozen, unable to move or speak, his mind struggling to process the betrayal in front of him. Derek, sensing Marcus's presence, immediately flew into a rage. Under the influence of drugs, his reaction was violent and uncontrollable. Without hesitation, he attacked Marcus, beating him mercilessly. Samantha, still in shock from being caught, did nothing to stop the violence. Marcus was no match for Derek's strength, and after a few brutal punches, he collapsed to the floor, blood pouring from his mouth. The pain was unbearable, but Marcus's survival instincts kicked in. He managed to crawl out of the room, his vision blurred, his head spinning from the blows. Stumbling into the living room, he reached for the phone, barely managing to dial 911 before Derek stormed after him. Before Marcus could say a word, Derek stabbed him in the leg with a kitchen knife, cutting off the call. Blood gushed from the wound as Marcus screamed in agony, his body writhing in pain. Derek, now fully panicked, dragged Marcus back into the bedroom, where he and Samantha tied him down, using belts to secure him to a chair. The room spun as Marcus felt his strength fading. His leg was bleeding profusely, and the pain was unbearable. Samantha, now realizing the gravity of the situation, was terrified. She had lost control of everything. Derek, who had seemed so exciting and carefree just hours earlier, was now a dangerous threat, and she had no idea how to escape the nightmare she had helped create. As Derek frantically paced the room, talking about how they would dispose of Marcus's body, Samantha could barely breathe. This wasn't what she had wanted, but it was too late to undo any of it. Unbeknownst to them, the police were already on their way, alerted by the brief 911 call and the concerned neighbors who had heard the earlier commotion. As Derek and Samantha argued over what to do next, sirens could be heard in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Marcus lay tied down in the bedroom, blood continuing to pour from the wound in his leg. The panic in the house grew palpable. The sirens outside grew louder, piercing the tense atmosphere. Derek, now fully aware that their time was running out, began to pace the room erratically. His mind, clouded by drugs and fear, spun wildly with ideas on how to escape the inevitable. Samantha stood frozen in the corner, her mind racing, heart pounding. The life she had so carefully constructed was unraveling before her eyes. Outside, the police surrounded the house. It was just after 9:30 p.m. on the evening of August 14th, 2012, when Officer James Monroe and his team arrived at the scene. They had been alerted by the brief emergency call and the neighbors who had heard the earlier commotion. The officers knew they were walking into a potentially dangerous situation, but they had no idea just how violent things were about to become. As Derek continued his frantic pacing, Samantha tried to calm him, but her words only seemed to fuel his agitation. His thoughts were erratic, jumping from one plan to another. He knew they couldn't leave Marcus alive, but with the police closing in, there was no time to think. He pulled out a gun from his jacket, ordering Samantha to hide. She stumbled backward, barely able to comprehend what was happening, and cowered behind the living room couch, her body trembling with fear. The sound of officers shouting outside filled the air. The police had positioned themselves strategically around the house, trying to de-escalate the situation. Officer Monroe, a seasoned law enforcement officer with over 15 years of experience, led the team, attempting to negotiate with Derek. Monroe had faced dangerous criminals before, but something about the erratic behavior inside the house made him uneasy. He tried to reason with Derek, hoping to avoid bloodshed, but it was too late. Derek, overwhelmed with fear and desperation, refused to surrender. The pressure mounted as the officers surrounded the house, and in a moment of blind panic, Derek opened fire. His first shot hit Officer Monroe squarely in the chest, sending him collapsing to the ground outside the front door. The shot echoed through the quiet suburban street, and in an instant, chaos erupted. The remaining officers returned fire, bullets ripping through the walls and windows of the house. Inside, Samantha watched in horror from her hiding spot behind the couch. The sound of gunfire was deafening, and with each shot, her terror grew. Derek was hit multiple times as the officers continued to fire. Blood spattered across the living room as his body slumped over the couch, his gun falling from his hand. His once confident and reckless demeanor was gone, replaced by the lifeless body of a man who had spiraled too far out of control. The once peaceful Wright household, filled with memories of family and love, had transformed into a bloody crime scene. The gunshots ceased, and the house fell silent once again. But the weight of what had just occurred hung heavy in the air. Officer Monroe's body lay motionless outside, a tragic casualty of the night's violence. Inside, Derek's lifeless body was sprawled across the couch, blood soaking into the fabric, his reign of terror brought to a brutal end. Moments after the gunfire ended, the police stormed the house, securing the scene. They found Samantha still cowering behind the couch, shaking uncontrollably, her hands covered in Derek's blood. Marcus, barely conscious, remained tied to the chair in the bedroom, his legs still bleeding profusely. The officers quickly untied him, rushing him to the hospital, where he would spend weeks recovering from his injuries. Samantha, sobbing uncontrollably, was immediately arrested. She was taken into custody, her once glamorous life in ruins. The police charged her with accessory to murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and a host of other crimes related to the events of that night. The reality of her actions had finally sunk in. She had gone from being the adored wife of a young entrepreneur to a woman involved in a deadly affair that had ended in violence and death. As news of the incident spread, the media descended upon the quiet suburb of Roseland, eager to report on the scandal that had rocked the community. Within days, Samantha's affair with Derek was exposed, and the details of her violent behavior toward Marcus became a focal point of the story. The once pristine image she had cultivated was shattered, replaced by headlines that painted her as a reckless, violent woman driven by greed and lust. The press dubbed the story the violent housewife's deadly affair, and it quickly became a nationwide sensation. Marcus, despite his injuries, chose to remain silent during the media frenzy. He focused on his recovery, spending weeks in the hospital and enduring multiple surgeries to repair the damage to his leg. The physical wounds would eventually heal, but the emotional scars were far deeper. The betrayal he had suffered at the hands of his wife was something he would carry with him for the rest of his life. By late 2012, Marcus had filed for divorce, severing all ties with the woman he had once loved. He moved away from Roseland, starting a new life far from the chaos that had torn his world apart. Samantha's trial took place in March 2013, and the courtroom was packed with reporters and spectators eager to see the conclusion of the case. The prosecution painted a damning picture of her, revealing that her affair with Derek had begun months before Marcus's financial downfall. Samantha had not only been unfaithful, but had also played an active role in the violent events that led to the death of Officer Monroe and nearly claimed Marcus's life. The defense tried to argue that Samantha had been manipulated by Derek, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than a day before returning a guilty verdict. On March 6, 2013, Samantha was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the judge handed down her sentence, she broke down in tears, finally realizing the full extent of what she had lost. Her once bright future was now gone, replaced by the cold reality of life behind bars. In the years that followed, Marcus rebuilt his life, remarrying in 2014 and moving to another state to start fresh. The memories of that night in August would never leave him, but he chose to focus on the future, determined not to let the past define him. Samantha, now serving a life sentence, spent her days reflecting on the choices that had led her to this point. She had once dreamed of a life of luxury and excitement, but her pursuit of those dreams had destroyed everything she held dear. The violent affair that had consumed her life ended in tragedy, leaving behind a trail of broken lives and shattered dreams. The quiet suburb of Roseland would never forget the events of August 14, 2012, when a deadly affair turned a family home into a crime scene. The story remained a chilling reminder of how quickly a life built on lies and deception could spiral out of control, leading to unimaginable consequences. On March 6, 2013, Samantha's trial concluded, and she was taken away in shackles, leaving behind a devastated family and community. The small town of Roseland was never the same after the violent affair and tragic shooting. Marcus rebuilt his life, though the scars of that terrible night would remain with him forever. But questions lingered. What drove Samantha to such a dark path? Was it the financial strain, or something more? What were the thoughts racing through Marcus's mind as he faced death at the hands of the man his wife had chosen? And what if the police had arrived just a few minutes later? The community was left to wonder what other secrets lay behind the doors of the house that had become a symbol of shattered lives. This gripping and violent tale leaves us asking, how far can someone go when pushed to the edge? And what lies ahead for the people who survive such a tragedy? We may truly never know, but we have cases where it's a man instead who seeks wealth and money by all means, like the case where a wife's secret affair with a young gold digger ends in homicide. Let's not forget to support by leaving a like and subscribing so you never miss on our daily updates.